sometimes just for relaxation, I'll come and play. So I would be doing this whether I was trying to create or not.
You've heard his voice, maybe on the radio, maybe in a movie. But what if I told you that the reason Roy Orbison could sing like that might be because of a medical experiment gone wrong? Yeah, not kidding. Before he became the mysterious legend in black, Roy was just a quiet, awkward kid growing up dirt poor in Texas during the tail end of the Great Depression. A loner, glasses too big for his face, skin too pale for the sun. While other kids played ball, Roy stayed inside. Why? Because he had something. A chronic breathing issue that made physical activity hard and left him gasping for air. But here's where it gets strange. At just 13 years old, Roy was reportedly taken in for a series of experimental sinus surgeries, procedures that today would be considered reckless, even dangerous. Doctors wanted to fix his breathing, but something else happened. After the surgery, his voice changed radically. His vocal range expanded to 3 octaves. Suddenly, this shy, scrawny teenager could hit high notes most grown men couldn't dream of. It was like the operation didn't just fix his sinuses, it unlocked a superpower. But what if the gift came with a cost? Those same surgeries allegedly left him with chronic migraines, facial pain, and a fragile emotional state. And some now believe that the very voice that made him famous was born out of accident, trauma, or even medical malpractice. Let that sink in. The most haunting voice in rock history might have been an unintended side effect. Roy Orbison didn't just write sad songs, he predicted them. Long before tragedy tore through his life, Roy was writing about loneliness, abandonment, and love gone wrong. Only the lonely, crying, "It's over." These weren't just songs, they were premonitions, and fans at the time, they just thought he was a sensitive guy with a golden voice. But here's the kicker. Those songs weren't fiction, they were prophecy. Roy's early career didn't skyrocket like Elvis or Jerry Lee Lewis. He struggled. He bounced between labels, got ignored, passed over, laughed at for looking like a depressed librarian instead of a rock star. One executive even told him, "You'll never make it. You don't look right." But then came Monument Records, and that's where Roy Orbison did something nobody saw coming. He reinvented the ballad. While everyone else was writing songs about cars and parties, Roy was singing about despair. Pure, cinematic, slow burn heartbreak. And not in a get over it kind of way. These were songs that felt like grief had pulled up a chair and stayed the night. Why did it connect? Because Roy wasn't performing. He was bleeding. Every note felt personal, like he was confessing something he couldn't say out loud. And deep down, maybe he knew. Something was coming. Something that would make all those sad songs seem too real. Because what happened next in Roy's life was worse than any song he ever wrote. He never smiled on stage. He barely moved, always dressed in black, hiding behind jet black sunglasses. Most people thought Roy Orbison was just being mysterious. Some even thought it was a marketing gimmick. But here's the thing, it wasn't an act. Roy's stage presence was dead serious, because he was dying inside. Behind those glasses wasn't a rock star, it was a man desperately trying to keep it together. And here's the twisted part. The industry loved it. They leaned into it, promoted him as the ghost of rock and roll, a man whose voice could shatter glass, but who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He became a paradox, a superstar who looked invisible. No wild performances, no fake smiles, just him, standing still, singing about heartbreak while looking completely numb. Was it depression, grief, trauma? Even his closest friends weren't sure, but fans started to wonder, is he okay? The truth? Not even close. Because just as Roy's career was exploding, his life behind the scenes was about to catch fire. They were picture perfect. Roy and Claudette. A teenage love story turned marriage. She was beautiful, full of life, and Roy adored her. He even wrote a song with her name in it. But like every beautiful thing in Roy's life, it didn't last. Their relationship was rocky, infidelity, separations, the stress of fame. But somehow they always found their way back to each other. Until one summer day in 1966 changed everything. They had just gotten back together. Things were good again. They were riding through Gallatin, Tennessee on motorcycles, free, young, in love. And then a truck pulled out. Claudette was hit, killed instantly. Just like that, she was gone. Roy was never the same again. His muse, his wife, the mother of his kids, wiped off the earth in a flash. But if that was the end of the nightmare, it might have been survivable. 2 years later, while Roy was touring in England, his house caught fire. By the early 1980s, Roy Orbison had faded into the background. The world had moved on. Punk was raging, MTV was booming, and nobody wanted to hear sad ballads from a man in his 40s wearing sunglasses at night. At least, that's what people thought. But then something weird happened. A new generation of icons, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, started calling him their hero. They weren't just fans, they were obsessed. They called his voice the sound of pure heartbreak. And just like that, Roy Orbison was back. In 1980, he recorded a haunting duet with Emmylou Harris called That Lovin' You Feelin' Again. It won a Grammy, silencing anyone who said he was a has-been. But that was just the warm-up. In 1988, a casual studio jam session accidentally created one of the greatest supergroups in rock history, the Traveling Wilburys. Tom Petty, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison. And guess what? Out of all those legends, Roy's voice stole the show. His vocals on Handle with Care hit like a lightning bolt. Soft, powerful, unshakable. Suddenly kids who'd never heard of him were Googling his name. His album, Mystery Girl, went platinum. Magazine covers, TV interviews, sold-out tours. To the world, it looked like the comeback of the century. But behind the scenes, Roy was dying, and nobody saw it. Everyone thought Roy was happy again. He smiled on stage, laughed during interviews. Fans said he looked like a man reborn. But the truth? He was hanging by a thread. In private, Roy was battling crippling exhaustion, chronic chest pain, and decades of unresolved trauma. He was constantly popping prescription meds, painkillers, sleeping pills, anxiety meds, just to make it through the day. His friends said he barely slept. His wife said he looked tired even when he was awake. And those smiles you saw on TV, they were fake. Because here's what you didn't see. Roy Orbison was living with untreated heart problems, and he knew something was wrong. He felt it, but instead of slowing down, he pushed harder. Why? Because after decades of grief and loss, he was finally back. People finally loved him again, and he didn't want to lose that. So he kept touring, kept recording, kept pushing until the machine inside him couldn't take it anymore. On December 6th, 1988, Roy Orbison had a heart attack and died. He was just 52 years old. And that comeback? It wasn't a second chance. It was a farewell tour in disguise. For years, people said Roy Orbison had a voice from heaven. 3 octaves. No strain, no cracks. A voice that could haunt you in your sleep. But what if I told you that voice may have been the result of medical trauma? See, when Roy was a teenager, he suffered from chronic respiratory problems and terrible eye conditions. Doctors put him through experimental surgeries, some so invasive that they may have altered his vocal structure permanently. We're talking damaged sinus cavities, throat scar tissue, vocal tension, stuff that would destroy most singers. But for Roy, it created something otherworldly. He didn't belt like Elvis or scream like Little Richard. He floated. His falsetto was so clean it didn't sound human. It sounded like pain, trapped in a cathedral. And here's the eerie part. That pain was real. It wasn't just the surgeries, it was the trauma, the loss, the grief. Roy didn't just sing heartbreak songs, he lived them. And every time he opened his mouth to sing, that pain came pouring out. His voice was his superpower, but it was also a reminder of everything he'd lost. Roy Orbison's death shook the music world, but what happened after he passed was just as shocking. His family, especially his wife Barbara and his surviving sons, started opening up about what life with Roy was really like. And the truth? He was never okay. He carried the deaths of Claudette, Roy Jr., and Anthony like anchors around his neck. He never talked about it, never went to therapy. He just sang. One of his final songs, The Way Is Love, was left unfinished when he died. But years later, his sons found the recording and finished it using their own voices. The result? A haunting posthumous duet, father and sons, reunited through music. And when you hear it, you'll feel it. This wasn't just a song, it was a goodbye letter. Roy's pain didn't disappear, it was passed on, but instead of breaking them, it bonded them. Today, his sons run Roy's estate. They remaster his records, keep his legacy alive. But if you ask them who Roy Orbison really was, they won't say a rock legend. They'll say he was the saddest man we ever knew, with the most beautiful voice we ever heard. Roy Orbison wasn't like other stars. No scandalous headlines, no wild interviews, no public breakdowns. He hid behind black clothes, black sunglasses, and a voice that made you feel like you were the one crying. But now, looking back, it's clear. He wasn't hiding behind the glasses. He was hiding behind the music. Every love song he sang was about the woman he'd lost. Every lyric about heartbreak was ripped from the pages of his own life. And the silence, that was the loudest part of all. While others flaunted their pain for attention, Roy buried his so deep, the only way he could express it was by singing it out, night after night, until it killed him and you never knew. In a world of flashy stars and fake drama, Roy Orbison was something rare, real. He didn't chase fame. He didn't pretend to be okay. He stood on stage, frozen in place, pouring out his soul through songs like Crying, Only the Lonely, and It's Over. And now it makes sense, because those songs weren't just music, they were confessions. And every time you hear that voice, that trembling, haunting voice, you're not just hearing a song, you're hearing a man trying to survive the kind of heartbreak that most people wouldn't live through. He didn't sing because he wanted to be famous. He sang because it was the only thing keeping him alive. If this story hit you like it hit me, let me know in the comments. And if you think more people need to hear the real stories behind these legends, share this video. Because some voices never die. And Roy Orbison's, that voice is eternal.